All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping right into a big one. One of the most influential and honestly, one of the most misunderstood science books ever. Richard Dawkins's The Selfish Gene. And let me tell you, this book completely changed the game. It shifted how we think about everything from evolution to our own behavior.
Okay, so to get into this, we have to start with a puzzle, a real paradox, actually. It's something that sits right at the core of Darwin's ideas and kind of seems to poke a hole in that whole survival of the fittest thing we all hear about.
And here's the question. If evolution is all about a selfish struggle for survival, then why on earth does altruism even exist? I mean, why would animals, or even us, sacrifice our own safety for someone else? You know, these acts of kindness, of cooperation, they just don't seem to fit with this picture of a purely selfish drive to survive. It's a real head-scratcher. So let's dig into a classic example that makes this paradox crystal clear.
Think about what's happening here. This bird is literally putting its life on the line to save its babies. If you think about it just from the perspective of that one bird's survival, well, it's totally irrational, right? It makes absolutely no sense. And that is the exact paradox Richard Dawkins wanted to crack. How could natural selection, this supposedly selfish process, lead to something so risky and so altruistic?
So how do we solve it? Well, Dawkins's big idea was that we've been looking at the whole thing wrong. He said, you know what? We're focusing on the wrong level. We're looking at the individual animal, but that's not where the action is. We need to go deeper.
And this is it, the game-changing shift in perspective. The fundamental unit of selection, the thing that evolution really acts on, it's not the species, it's not even the individual creature, it's the gene. Genes are the real replicators here, these tiny fragments of code. Their only goal, and I'm using quotes there, is just to make more copies of themselves, to survive generation after generation.
Now, this is probably one of the most famous and, one of the most provocative ideas in the entire book. He says that we, you, me, every animal, we aren't the main characters in this evolutionary story. We are the vehicles, or as he puts it, survival machines. We're like these incredibly complex robots built by our genes, for our genes, just to keep them safe and help them make copies. So our bodies, our brains, even our behaviors, they're all just tools that were shaped over eons for one purpose, the gene's survival.
And he uses this great analogy. Successful genes are like Chicago gangsters. I mean, think about it. For a gene to stick around for millions of years, it has to be an incredible competitor. Not because it's consciously trying to be tough, but just because the genes that are still around today are the ones that won. They're the ones that outcompeted every other rival for a precious spot in the gene pool of the next generation.
Okay, so now that we have this gene's eye view, let's go back to our original problem. That little bird pretending to have a broken wing. Can this new way of thinking finally explain why it would do something so seemingly selfless?
Well, the old way of thinking about this was something called group selection. Basically the idea that animals do things for the good of the species. But Dawkins points out a huge problem with that. It's just not stable. Imagine a group where everyone is a self-sacrificing altruist. Now what happens if a single selfish individual shows up? Their genes would spread like wildfire, right? Because they'd be taking advantage of everyone else's kindness. But the gene's eye view, now that gives us a much more solid explanation.
And here's the first big piece of the puzzle, kin selection. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. A gene that makes you act altruistic can actually do really well for itself if it makes you help out your family. Why? Because your relatives are very likely to be carrying copies of that exact same gene. So, from the gene's perspective, it's not selfless at all. It's pure, ruthless self-interest. Helping your sibling is just another way for the gene to help itself survive in another body.
And it really all boils down to a numbers game, a game of probability. On average, you share half of your genes with a parent, a child, or a full sibling. So let's go back to that bird. A gene that tells the parent to risk its one life to save, say, 3 chicks. Well, that's a fantastic bet from the gene's point of view. It's trading one vehicle for multiple new ones. It's a win. But this genetic connection gets weaker the further you go out. For an uncle or a nephew, you're looking at a 1/4 share.
And by the time you get to a first cousin, it's down to 1/8. So you can see how the genetic incentive to be altruistic just keeps dropping.
Okay, but that explains family. What about helping out strangers, people you're not related to? For this, Dawkins brings in game theory, and specifically, the famous prisoner's dilemma. Now, you've probably heard of this. Two players can either choose to cooperate or to defect, to betray the other. The best outcome for both is if you both cooperate. But the biggest individual payoff comes if you defect while the other person cooperates. That's the temptation. The flip side, of course, is that if you both defect, you both get a really bad result. It's a total mess.
So in a world where individuals meet each other over and over again, certain strategies can become really stable. He calls this an evolutionarily stable strategy, or ESS. And the most famous one is tit for tat. It's so simple. Be nice on the first move, cooperate. After that, just do whatever your opponent did last time. So it's forgiving, but it will also punish you if you try to cheat. It's the simple rule that allows for what we call reciprocal altruism to pop up. You know, the whole you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours idea. And in the long run, that kind of stable cooperation benefits the genes of everyone involved.
All right, so this is where things get really interesting. Dawkins takes his central idea, the replicator, and he makes this incredible leap from biology right into the world of human culture.
He asked this amazing question. If the engine of all this is just a self-copying thing, a replicator, are genes the only ones out there? Is DNA the only game in town? Or just maybe, has a totally new kind of replicator shown up on Earth?
And this is where he coined a word that you definitely know, the meme. Now, forget the funny cat pictures for a second. For Dawkins, a meme is the basic unit of our culture. It's an idea, a tune, a catchphrase, a fashion. It's any bit of culture that spreads by jumping from brain to brain through imitation. And just like genes, memes compete with each other. They compete for our attention and for space in our minds.
I mean, look around. Memes are literally the fabric of our culture. Things like an earworm tune you can't get out of your head. Big ideas like democracy or religion, catchphrases, what's in style this year, even something like a specific way of building an arch. All of these are memes. And they're all evolving in this big soup of human culture, kind of like genes do in the gene pool, but way, way faster. Which brings us to the last, and maybe the most powerful, idea in this whole explainer. What does all of this, the genes, the memes, what does it all mean for us? For conscious, thinking human beings?
So here's the picture he paints. We're sort of caught in the middle of these two immense forces. On one hand, we've got the ancient, slow, blind programming of our selfish genes. And on the other, we have the super fast, infectious programming of our selfish memes. We're basically the survival machines for both of them. But, and this is the incredible final twist of the book, we have a secret weapon. Consciousness. Foresight. We are the only things on this planet that can actually understand our own programming. We can see the puppet strings. We can think about the future and decide to act against the scripts our genes and memes have handed us. That is the rebellion he's talking about. We can choose to be genuinely, truly altruistic, to consciously defy our selfish creators.
And that right there is the huge question the selfish gene leaves us to wrestle with. Yeah, we're survival machines, but we're the only survival machines who have ever been able to read our own blueprints. We alone can see this tyranny of the selfish replicators for what it is. And because we can see it, the choice of whether to rebel or not is entirely ours. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.